Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Immigrant Finance Podcast. This is Adina, your host, and I'm here today with Priya Nakra from Nova Credit, who's going to be speaking to us about building credit in the U.S. as an immigrant and the credit passport that her company offers. So welcome, Priya. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Adina. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Do you want to just go ahead and share a little bit about what Nova Credit is, what you all do?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, my name is Priya Nakra, and I lead the product and design functions at Nova Credit for our flagship product, which is called the Credit Passport. So Nova Credit as a company, we're on a mission to help accelerate financial inclusion and remove barriers for, underserved populations and segments that traditionally haven't had access to credit products in the US. And so one of the ways we do that is through the Credit Passport product, which enables consumers to bring their foreign financial credit history with them when they come to the US so that they're not starting from scratch with no US credit file. And that way they're able to get approved for credit cards, get approved for personal loans, auto loans, mobile phones, and things like that. So since our founding in 2016, we've been able to build foreign bureau relationships and partnerships with across 20 countries to help us gain access to about 1 billion consumer profiles. And also since then, we've partnered with customers like American Express, Verizon Wireless, Empower, and Prodigy on the student lending side to help consumers who are coming to the US from some of these countries to bring their foreign credit history with them so that they can actually be approved for some of these products.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that overview. It's really cool to see how y'all been growing. I don't know if anyone mentioned it to you yet, but I actually met Misha several years ago when Nova Credit was getting started. Just for our audience to know kind of the story of how we've known your company. So I was in San Francisco visiting some best friends from college, and one of them telling them about immigrant finance. We were just starting it. And one of them was like, "Hey, I have this friend who's also working in financial access for immigrants, and here's his contact information. Reach out." And I just sent him a message. I was in town. He's like, "Come on by." So I don't know if you're still in the same office that you always were. Are you?
If it was before 2019, it was probably a different office.
It was before.
Yeah. So right now our San Francisco office is in the Mission on
Okay.
Yeah, and we also have an office in New York.
Very cool.
Expanding and but it's very cool to see that you had a connection with Misha before. Misha started Nova Credit back in 2016 with a couple of his co-founders. It actually was born out of a business school project, basically. And they were the three founders were immigrants themselves. So
Amazing.
It's near and dear to their heart, and they've experienced it personally. So that's why they kind of stood this up as a real company and a real product. And we've been growing ever since.
It's really cool. And it was so amazing then to see it in action starting. I think there's probably maybe 10 people working there at the time. I forget the area of San Francisco it was. It was I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, it was really awesome to see all have continued growing and to reconnect. So so you mentioned that you all have now grown to 2 offices. You've been able to get over 1 billion credit profiles. So catch us up a little bit on how that growth has looked since you all started, and how you've been able to be helping people.
Yeah, definitely. You nailed it. It's a lot of growth. It's a lot of growth also in spite of everything that could have stopped our growth, right? Between COVID and closed borders and slowing down of immigration. We made it out on the other side, and we figured out a lot, and we've signed a lot more customers and signed a lot more bureau partnerships. So what that growth really looks like is getting deeper in partnerships, existing partnerships like with American Express. So at the end of last year, we enabled 5 new countries in addition to the original launch. So now they're supporting about immigrants coming from 9 countries now, and actually later this year we should probably be enabling some more. So it's kind of about growing and deepening our relationship with existing customers like American Express and some of our flagship customers as well, like Empower, creating new capabilities, creating new bureau partnerships to support more citizens who are moving to the US around the globe. And then also another part of the expansion is outside of the US. A big focus of 2022 has been our global expansion. So our mission was never just meant to be serving newcomers coming to the US, but also newcomers going to, let's say India to Singapore, or Australia to the UK, or the UK, or even US to Canada, or something like that. And so that's really part of our next stage as a company, is doing that global expansion, taking the same product, the credit passport product, and all of the existing integrations and all the existing countries we support, and being able to serve a much higher addressable market, as opposed to just newcomers coming to the US. So it's growth in depth as well as breadth, which has been really, really exciting. And then, the other piece is, like I was saying, our existing customers were mostly in the retail card and personal loan, student loan space. But now we've expanded across multiple verticals. So we now have an auto loan partner. We now have a mobile device partner, telco partner with Verizon. So it's kind of growth in all different directions, which is really exciting. And so, yeah, there's been a lot happening.
I love it. That's so cool to hear. And I'm like geeking out over here about how this just changes immigration itself, right? And kind of what y'all are doing to make things easier for people, beyond what's possible in the very harsh immigration laws, right? But for people who are listening and are like, what are they talking about? What is a credit passport? Can you kind of break it down simply, and why that's needed and why it's important?
Definitely. So the way the credit passport works is, let's say you're living in India, but you want to come to the US for a grad program, right? A graduate student program, and you want to move to the US and make your big move here. And you already have a credit file in India. So you have an Indian credit file. What the credit passport does is it takes all of the data from your Indian credit file that proves that you're credit worthy in your home country, and translates it to a US standard credit report. So we take the Indian Bureau score, we translate it to a US credit score, all of the things like trade lines, asset information, income information, it's all transferred into a standard US report, so that US lenders like American Express, like Verizon, like a student loan provider, don't have to understand all of the bureau nuances about the Indian credit report. We do that for them, basically, and we translate it into a way that they can really understand and seamlessly approve you, because you are creditworthy in your home country. So it's the real value proposition is, like I said, that standardization, and that real time translation of a foreign credit report to a US credit report.
Got it. And before Nova Credit was doing this, would those companies even make the effort to try to translate? It just wouldn't happen, right? Like people would have to start from nothing and rebuild credit here, even if they had excellent credit in their home country.
Their home country, exactly right. Yeah, before Nova Credit, there really was no way to transfer credit history, let alone in a way that makes sense to US lenders that are already doing these types of approvals. So it really has opened a lot of doors for newcomers themselves, as well as lenders, because lenders want to be able to, and card providers want to be able to reach out to this particular segment, especially because there's a lifetime value of immigrants coming to the US, and so it's kind of mutual benefit in both ways. And like you said, it is pretty to think about the fact that this wasn't a capability, back in 2015, 2016, like that is pretty wild to think about, just like how far we've come in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible what y'all are doing and the impact you're having. I'm thinking too, like, I think with immigration reform conversations, people often assume that, business owners, can tend to be more, these big companies might be more conservative, potentially politically, who knows, may not necessarily be supportive of immigrants. So I'm curious, like, if you have experienced any pushback, or if these companies are all just like, yeah, it makes complete sense, like we want to be serving these people.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's not a lot of pushback with there's definitely not a lot of pushback with the thesis, right? Because the thesis makes sense. If you're creditworthy in your home country, you're creditworthy in your new country. It's not that when you move to a new destination, all of a sudden, like your behavior changes like that. Your ability to pay and overall affordability pretty much remains the same, or increases depending on the opportunities you're actually moving for. So I think that's actually pretty, I would say, widely understood, especially when we, we as Nova Credit also try and really understand the mindset of immigrants and newcomers coming to the US. We do a lot of user studies, we do a lot of user research, and we do a lot of understanding of how consumers' ability to pay might increase and evolve over time. And that's, if there is any pushback, it's pretty easily quelled when you're talking to customers, because you have that data of saying like, no, people want to move here for new opportunities. They want to stay. They want to create
Yeah.
additional wealth. They want to, get the STEM grad degree, and they want to build a life for themselves here. And so it's in terms of that, like, convincing of the lifetime value, it's pretty clear, like, the proof is in the
Yeah.
pudding there.
That's awesome to hear. I thought you might say that. And I mean, so exciting because, from our perspective, like we're all about financially empowering immigrants and for so many reasons, right? But one like potential outcome of that is as we have more immigrants who have these financial options and have financial stability and access to the system, and they can like start actually building wealth and not having to freak out constantly about surviving, and they can
Yeah.
actually do what people are often here to do, which is like contribute to this country and grow the economy as immigrants always have.
Yeah.
It's really exciting, is I really think that is ultimately what's going to change the direction for changing the immigration laws from what
Totally.
I've seen as an immigration lawyer. So I love all the movement and synergy happening on the financial side with both our companies. And I know we went down, I want to give you a chance to respond, but I also next want to, when you get a chance, get into like hearing a little bit about your own family's immigrant background and your connection to this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, first, yeah, you hit the nail on the head entirely, and I think it does actually dovetail quite nicely into my own experience too. And part of a big reason why I joined Nov Credit as a company. I was born in the U.S., but my parents immigrated from India in the late 70s, early 80s, and my sister and I have heard the story many times that my dad came to the US when he was 19 years old and $20 in his pocket. Of course, every time he tells the story, I think the amount of dollars in his pocket tends to decrease. So we're probably at like, 25 cents at this point or something, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I mean, growing up with that story and growing up with the really keen and detailed understanding of the immigrant experience, not just from a financial perspective, but that's obviously such a huge thing, is like, when he came in 1978, obviously couldn't get a credit card. The world looked different. The US credit system looked different, but he came as a student, had to have his brother who was already here help him co-sign for an apartment. He actually didn't get his first credit card until 3 years into the US. So, and it was actually like a retail card from his employer at the time. So, and back to your previous question, like that's usually the type of card options that are provided to newcomers into the US without their foreign credit history, or like really low credit limit type cards, and not really kind of the premier American Express, Citi, Chase types of cards that you would think, US citizens have and have access to, even though their credit worthiness is as high as those. So but yeah, that's definitely shaped my experience in a lot of ways. And when I was considering joining Nova Credit back in, end of 2020, yeah, when I talked to him about it, it was like, it felt so tangible and it felt so easy to resonate with. And yeah, I think it's very, very a common theme that I hear from everybody that I work with at Nova Credit. I think the last number I checked was about 70% of the company is either an immigrant themselves or a child of immigrants, part of an immigrant family. So yeah, like I was saying, it's not a difficult concept or a difficult mission to really connect with. And it is high impact, and the effect you're having on real people in a real material way is what keeps us going.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Love the mission, and you're making such a difference. Can you talk next about why it's important to build credit, and why people should think about this, whether they can qualify for the credit passport or not? Just generally, how credit changes the game for immigrants.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think one of the biggest themes we see in our research with immigrants is that the importance of credit is not widely understood until you either are like really close to getting here or have gotten here, because credit is so important in all different aspects of somebody's life, not just financial products like a credit card, but to get approved for an apartment. That's why we have tenant screening partners, device financing options for a mobile phone, personal loans, auto loans, buying a car, like all of these things, you know, traditionally require a US credit pull. And if you don't have that, then you're pretty much out of luck, or you're stuck, you know, in the device financing option or loan financing options with like kind of the worst rates, you know, that don't make you want to take that product anyways. So it is really important because it is so, and I think even as someone who was born here, us, you know, having the privilege of having born here, you kind of don't think about all of those things. You know, you do a one-time credit pull and then you just keep it moving. But for someone who doesn't have that access, you're kind of constantly reminded of like, wow, I really need this capability in order to do anything. So it is really important. And that's also why it's, you know, the credit passport product is it's really beneficial, because as soon as you are able to get approved for a credit card or anything like that, you automatically start building that US credit, so that, you know, eventually we're not just entirely reliant on your foreign credit, but you start kind of creating that financial footprint here in the US so that you have more access to products in the future.
So it's like the bridge.
Yes. Yeah.
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 That's great. That's great. And by the way, thank you for sharing your family's immigrant story. That was really cool to hear about your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah, I mean, I want to highlight too the American dream of real estate. You know, that's a huge piece for why you need to be building credit that a lot of people don't fully realize until it's kind of too late, right? And then you're stuck with a higher interest rate because you haven't been building your credit score.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's all part of the, you know, as you said, American dream. Even if property is not like entirely on your mind day one, which, you know, most people it is. But like, yeah, it's a huge barrier to entry, to even like start looking at places you might be able to afford. Even from a renting perspective, like I said, that's why we have tenant screener partners, because that credit pull is required, or that credit check is required before approval. So yeah, it's a good call out though.
Something I was always curious about, if you don't mind me asking, with the tenant pulling, how does that work? Like, is that only for kind of big apartments, you know, where it's more formal process to apply to rent?
Yeah, it's a good question. Most of our tenant screening customers are, yeah, those bigger properties, like a Gray Star management or something like that. So we don't work with the properties directly. We work with more of the like umbrella customers that have a bunch of properties with them. But
okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So if you're renting an apartment at like a bigger kind of building or something, you might have to have your credit pulled to apply. But maybe if you're renting from like, you know, one guy who owns one property, they may not necessarily.
Yeah, they may not. Yeah. But yeah, there's we see enough of an interest from the tenant screening properties because of the consumers they're serving too, to make it kind of a need there. But yeah, you're right that it's more in front of those like formal property management companies.
Yeah. I will say though, like I remember having to give my credit report when the last time I rented, when it was just from someone who owned the place. It was in a big building.
Yeah. That's probably that's fair. I don't know if any of those people would accept foreign credit reports, like if you were to get your or something. But I think again, the biggest advantage of what we provide is that it's all real-time programmatic. Consumer doesn't have to do anything like extra. They don't have to pay extra to get their credit report, you know, from their home country. It's all within the one seamless flow, consumer experience and customer experience.
Amazing. Do you have anything you want to add on, like with the next stage y'all are going into with helping in other countries be able to transfer credit? How would that change the world?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is like we don't know yet, because it like I will say one thing that having worked in the alternative data space, like if you think about you know, domestic credit pulls as traditional credit data. If you rely on any other types of data, we call that alternative data, like within the credit risk underwriting kind of industry. I would say that other regions outside of the US are actually a bit quicker to embrace these alternative data sets. You know, like telco data is really prevalent within the APAC region as a way of showing, you know, affordability and transactions and things like that, because, and that's usually meant to supplement the fact that some of these credit bureaus in these same regions don't have the highest amount of coverage. So it still proves that, you know, someone's there, even if they don't have a domestic credit file, and might be willing or wanting to apply for some of these financial products. So I think the cool thing about expanding globally is we're learning how some of these data sets outside of traditional credit are already being leveraged for different types of products. And then it also just kind of, you know, excites us even more about the potential, not only within the US, but globally, about, you know, what would it look like if a bank, if you're applying for a credit card, you have a full financial picture given to somebody who's doing the underwriting. Maybe it's a thin file, or maybe it's a score, credit score, but it's used in conjunction with bank transaction data or telco data or utilities data and stuff like that. And that really paints like a really robust picture. And it helps the consumer as well. It helps the customer as well. So it's like, because they're making smarter underwriting decisions. The consumer, it helps because it shows the full picture of, even if one of those data sets is like not entirely robust, you see other data sets that help show that the overall worthiness or financial worthiness and ability to pay in the future of the consumer. So I think, to your question, we're seeing a little bit of it now, like adoption of some of these alternative data sets, not really in the US, but in other markets. And then once this becomes kind of the standard globally, then, you know, Sarah Davies, who's our chief risk officer, always likes to say our goal is that in a certain amount of years, financial inclusion is not even a term, because there's no such thing as financial exclusion, right? That everybody has access to all products are all around the world. Obviously, it's a big dream, big vision, but like,
so cool.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. So yeah.
I love it. Yeah, it's so funny. You can tell you have like such a data brain, how you answered that. Because my immigration law head is like, oh my gosh, like people are gonna be able to live wherever they want so easily, and like the immigration laws are gonna have to catch up, you know, with the financial stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it has to be like a symbiosis, right? Like hand in hand. If, you know, if the industry, either from a technical perspective or an underwriting perspective, like tends to progress where it does actually enable true cross-border movement, then yeah, like, you know, everything else has to kind of fall in place. So yeah, it would be like a huge shift, not just, you know, within fintech or within data. Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, we're already seeing it just with the internet, right? Like
Yeah.
people being able to work with people around the world, right? And talk to people around the world, and the immigration law system is just so behind.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're making me nerd out now about like the future of the nation state.
No, I totally, yeah, I see it. Yeah. I mean, we talk about financial Pangea a lot, but I'm sure it's the same as like in immigration law, every other industry, but just like, yeah, the long-term vision of true cross-border movement is very exciting.
It really is. And if you think about it, like credit scores and credit reports have not been around that long. Weren't they invented in like the 50s or 60s or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good point. There's a lot of, you know, I would say it's pretty recent. It's also come a long way, but in so many respects, it's also not come a long way, which is why the concept of alternative data is even, you know, is even a topic of conversation around the world, is because sometimes traditional credit scores are just not enough to get a financial picture. And that's bound to happen, right? With an industry that's, you know, it's fairly new, but still also kind of playing catch up with, you know, how quickly people are moving across the globe. So yeah, but that's why I'm saying, like, you know, outside of the credit passport, we're also working on a new product, which is called Cash Atlas, which is meant not for immigrants, but for people who are already in the US, who again don't have you know, very strong credit files, but we use their bank transaction data to help lenders actually decision off of it. So again, it's like another data set. And again, it goes back to what I was saying at the top of the call, just like, you know, our mission is financial inclusion to serve any community, any segment that is underserved by the traditional credit system. So whether that's foreign credit transfer or something like bank transaction data and adding analytics on top, and who knows what the next product would be, but hopefully it continues to grow like that.
Wow, so freaking cool. That's amazing. I love what y'all are doing. I'm not surprised that hearing about what y'all are up to is just mind-blowing, just like it was when I heard about your first doing back in what I don't know if it was 2019 or what. Amazing. Is there anything else you want to add about like just generally on credit or finance for the immigrant community?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just say we have a lot of exciting stuff happening, as I was mentioning before. I know I mentioned Verizon a couple of times, but it's very top of mind because it was yesterday. We actually launched with we launched with their digital application a few months ago, but as of yesterday, we're actually deployed into 1,500 retail locations across the US.
Wow,
So it's,
congrats.
yeah, thank you. But yeah, it's the first time ever that a newcomer without domestic credit history can walk into a Verizon store and use their foreign credit history to get approved for device financing options and more. So it's a pretty big milestone, not just for us as a company, because it's our first retail and store launch, but also just, immigrants alike. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and so that's really
that's
exciting. And then,
huge.
yeah, the other thing I'll also say is more on the consumer side. As I was mentioning before, we spend a lot of time really trying to understand this segment, and that's really important to us. And throughout the research, obviously, we see that there's a lot of anxiety when people first come, not just to the U.S. but to their new home country. And so, one of our most recent launches we did, which you can find on our website, within the resources menu, is we call it the interactive newcomer guide. So it actually is like a one-stop shop checklist for people who are planning to move to the US, and it's sectioned by before you move, when you arrive, after you move, kind of
Mhm.
thing. So it helps categorize all of it's meant to be like that universal checklist of like everything you should think about before you come to the US. And
Wow.
some of it
Yeah.
is related to credit products, some of it we have customers for, but it's just, yeah, that's also part of our mission is to become that one-stop shop for consumers. Because really, if we can do anything to ease that anxiety and make that seamless transition like a lot easier
Yeah.
for people new to country, then that's all part of serving the segment. So
Well, that definitely speaks to me and what we do in immigrant finance because we started after my husband and I went through this experience when he immigrated to the US
yeah,
and we had a lot of anxiety about
yeah,
money,
exactly,
It's
right,
exactly that. So that would have been amazing to have access that at that time. And I'm sure it's
yeah,
gonna help a lot of people.
yeah, we hope so for sure.
Very cool. What is the last question for you is like the number one lesson you had wish you learned about, whether it's credit, or finance in the beginning of whether your career, your journey and learning about all this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably reframe the question and say I was lucky enough to learn a lot of lessons because of my parents and just
Yeah.
the importance of things like generational wealth and investments and um, you know, obviously they're always on me about saving more and things like that. So I think, being able to marry like my experience and going into the real world and within my career and stuff and understanding how important things like credit are, for all of these different types of products, being able to marry my experience with their experience has really been able to um, kind of just bolster, yeah, all of the lessons that they had to learn for the first time. And so
Mhm.
because I didn't have to learn it for the first time, I'm actually quite like lucky and privileged the fact that they were able to like bestow a lot of lessons upon me. So not really an answer to your question, but hopefully it's like give that perspective of not an immigrant myself, but someone who was, privileged enough to have parents who cared enough about their lives and the lives of their kids to actually make a better life, and turn, the $20 in my dad's pocket into something much more long withstanding.
I love it. That was a great answer. I have to ask, 'cause it makes me think for all of our audience members who are children of immigrants, like,
Mhm.
is there anything that you feel like has been significant you have learned growing up here that maybe your parents as immigrants didn't know that was important financially?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I learned a lot with my parents along the way, like especially
Uh-huh.
working in tech. There are, when they never worked for startups, so like even
Yeah.
even getting some of your compensation and things like stock options or understanding equity. I needed to rely on them a lot too. I needed to rely on other people within my community who had more of that experience as well. But like I
Mhm.
said, we kind of learned along the way.
Yeah.
Um, and and all types of things, but I think from like a financial basics perspective, like they taught me all about a 401k, right? They taught me all about
Yeah.
the how much you should be saving month over month. They, you know, they're still on me about not investing in property, the fact that I'm still renting and things like that. So it's pretty consistent. And the things they didn't know, I, you know, like I said, relied on other people, but also
Yeah.
kind of feeds back into what we know as a family, which is really helpful.
That's amazing to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
It's very helpful, I think, for people who are first arriving to hear, you know, how the information can be learned over
Totally.
generations. And then where would be the best place for people to go learn more about Nova Credit?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say our LinkedIn is probably the source of truth for all things about our launches, anything press related. So it's just Nova Credit Inc. on LinkedIn. And then we also have Twitter, which you can see, you know, any sort of press releases about our upcoming launches. And then our website, like I said, for anyone who's interested in checking out the interactive newcomer guide, it's hello.novacredit.com. And you can play around, you can see all of our customers and what our product types are. And then if you want to see that guide in particular, it's under the resources menu.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll definitely link that below. So thanks for
That'd be
your
great.
time, Priya. This was really awesome to hear about what y'all are doing, and appreciate your sharing this information.
Yeah, of course. It was a great chat. Thank you so much, Adina.
Thank you.